edition of the Panos Sessions. I am your moderator, your resident digital strategist, Jordan Julio. Today I'm joined by our VP of Creative, Paul Tonelli, and one of our lead designers, Alina McGinty. So before we get started, I'll let introductions start. So Paul, if you want to kick us off.
Sure. Hi there, my name is Paul Tonelli. I'm the creative director at Panos. Been there for 4 years. Been a creative director for a little over 20. Essentially, my background has been working on national brands for a number of years. Worked on General Motors, Goodyear Tire, American Express, a number of different brands, Harvard Pilgrim, and some financial brands as well, GMAC and Ally Bank. At Panos, I lead a team of 6 designers and 3 copywriters. We do just about everything from soup to nuts, including video, design, brand direction, and concept development. And Alina is one of our highly talented designers on staff, and she can introduce herself now.
Hi, I'm Alina McGinty, and as Paul said, I am a senior designer here at Panos. I have been a designer for approaching 20 years. I think it's like 17 now. And I think a big bulk of those years are here. I want to say it's 12 or 13, like I don't even know, like forever. So I love working at Panos, and I love, one of the things that I enjoy most as a designer is being really involved in branding and creating and overseeing brand identities for clients. And watching, and I've been here so long that I've seen clients, evolve since we've been here, and so that kind of, leads into what we're talking about today with brands and how they continuously evolve over time and how to do that.
Phenomenal. Yeah, Alina, I think you've been working on brands almost as long as I've been alive. So
Stop it. Stop it.
No, it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
And that means I've been doing it as long as both of you combined have been alive. So that's scary.
No, not a day over 24. So yeah, this webinar today, we're going to be talking about the importance of brand and what your logo means and says about your financial institution. And with that, I mean, Alina, when it comes to brand, tell us what role the logo plays and how it can be beneficial to your FI and recognition to your community.
Yeah, of course. So the logo is most commonly mistaken for being the brand itself. Your logo isn't necessarily the whole brand. It's a piece of the brand. It's a very functional tool that's in your marketing toolbox, your greater marketing toolbox, I would say. And it represents who you are in a very instant way, in a very powerful and recognition type of way to your clients on who you are. It can say a lot of things about you in such a short amount of time. So it's kind of like a small advertisement, right? So but the idea is to keep it simple and getting the point across in a very short amount of space and time. So but you need to have a lot more behind it to represent everything about your brand.
I mean, I would just add that it really is it's a sort of an icon that represents what you stand for. So it's a reminder, that when there's a perception in the marketplace of your brand, whether you're sort of a giving to the community type of brand, or you're fun, or whatever your personality might be, the logo is sort of a reminder of that. It's like, oh, I had an impression of them, and now I'm sort of bringing it back top of mind. So being able to align that look and feel with your core values and all the good things that you stand for is really important. Part of your logo.
So you mentioned, what your logo represents, what your brand stands for, and recognition, etc. But if you've had such a strong brand and logo for so long, when's the best time to think about refreshing it? There might be some pushback. The board members might love it. The community you feel may love it. When's the best time?
I can jump in on that one if you want.
Yeah.
Brand identities, they last a long time. And you could be an older brand and you've been carrying this look and feel for a long time. And the tendency is to want to keep it forever, especially some people have been associated with the brand for a long time. They have a hard time, sort of letting loose of what it was. But, people change, desires change in the marketplace, and you can rip the Band-Aid off and change it completely, but that wouldn't be a smart thing to do. More often than not, it's not a smart thing to do, because it means that you're forgetting your past, or you're leaving equity maybe on the table that you need to bring forward. So refreshing a brand, a logo at the time that you're refreshing your brand, it may not be, what you do, but it's certainly worth looking at to see if it is, something that you need to consider.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to piggyback there. So, as much you put a lot of, you have a lot of equity in your logo, and you've had it for a long time, but the world moves on too. So you have to think about your audience, and if your logo is starting to look old, and your typical audience isn't going to say, oh, well, it looks dated because of this typography or this or that. Exactly, but they know that it looks kind of dated.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's not right.
It's like,
something's not right.
Yeah. It's so just like, the fashion industry, like you can tell, I mean, there's design trends too, right? So you don't want a logo that's going to be too trendy, that's going to be out of favor soon either. You want something that's going to span some time. But there's a lot of logos out there from old past brands, and there's ways of identifying like, that looks like it could be a little old. And then, there's other practical applications to why you might want to do it too. Like, busier logos that look, more hand-drawn, or like have a lot of complications in them, or shadows or gradients or things like, they're harder to use across different platforms now that we're going very digital and social media and things. And even to the point of like, where's your logo going to be used? Is it going to be embroidered? Is it going to be put on different pieces? Like, the more complicated you have of a logo and stuff, it might be worth looking at simplifying and modernizing it a little bit, to be used over a broad variety of places. So that's another reason.
That's a great point. I would, when you're developing your brand, I mean, if you keep in mind that you have leadership in place, there's vision in place that you want to be something, and it's not always what the perception of the marketplace is. So if the audience is saying, I think you're this, and leadership is saying, well, we're this, the audience is asking for something, and then you have a culture in place. So the three elements of like vision, your internal culture, and then what the audience is looking for is what makes up the brand. So if your logo is falling short of that promise, right? Because at the end of the day, your logo is part of that messaging, that you throw out there. Even though it's a visual thing, it represents sort of who you are to some degree. So it needs to align with what those values are and what the audience is looking for.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of hesitation and a lot of fear, you could say, when going under, a rebrand or a new logo, because your logo has represented who you are for so long. And there's a fear where if you just totally you go to left field, you 86 it and do something new and refresh it, that sense of recognition is just going to go, off the haywire, which is, it's a scary thing. Not to say it's not beneficial, but I can see where there is some client pushback to where it's like, oh, we want to refresh the brand, but the logo, we just know it's comfortable. But sometimes complacency is going to hurt you more than help you.
There's also ways of doing, a refresh versus a rebrand. So, I mean, you don't have to throw everything away. And so I would say, when you're talking about a refresh, it's taking a look at what are those elements that, do have that important longevity that you want to keep, a part of your, what do you want to keep, and how can we modernize it in a way that makes it a little bit fresh and new, but still retains like everything that it has.
Right. So when we talk about the holisticness of like a brand, we have twofold here. We have our logo, but then we also have our tagline. So how does all of this affect and impact the tagline, Paul?
Again, going back to the messaging that you put in place, for us, if we're fortunate enough to start a brand from the beginning, right? Okay, we have a new client and we're going to do a brand refresh, and we want to establish an understanding of what they do really well. Again, going back to what the market is looking for and what the vision is. The tagline, it's made up of words, right? And those words are meaningful. So it's important to sort of categorize. I categorize the tagline more in a messaging platform as opposed to even though it's more often than not connected to the logo, it really has everything to do with, with the message that you put out there. So, a tagline can sound really old sometimes. Desires change, like we talked about, and if that logo is talking about speaking to something that is 1980s, like it just doesn't feel right, then it may be time to take a look at it.
So when we talk about now the brand, the logo, the tagline, who is really looking, and why does this even matter in the grand scheme of your business, your FI?
It's sort of like, not to beat the same drum, but there are, there's people looking. Your current customers are looking, prospects are looking, your community is looking, other businesses in your community are taking a look at you and say, hey, do I want to partner up with them? Are they savvy enough to be my partner? Are they contemporary enough to be, do I want to align my company with their company? So there's a lot of audiences out there looking at your brand, just to see whether you can relate to each other. And communities have a different vibe. Parts of the country have a different vibe, and you want to be able to stay on top of what people are looking for.
Yeah, I would say it's better to be the trendsetter and to be the first person to change it up and have everyone kind of look at you versus being the follower and having and you playing catch up and trying to battle back. It's like, oh, keeping up with the Joneses. This FI and this brand was a brand refresh. Now look what we have to do now. We have to overhaul it, and maybe we're not ready, but it feels like a force versus a nice to have. And like, oh, we want to do this, right?
Yep, very good.
So okay, so say I'm a financial institution. I've been in place for 100+ years. I have my footing. Doesn't your longevity suggest, why should I fix my brand if it's not broken? If I have the recognition, I've been in place for so long, and everything's going good. What's the point of a refresh?
Well, I would say if everything's going really, really well, then you probably don't need a refresh. But chances are that's an internal perception and not an external perception, which is so starting out with an understanding of that first and foremost. So maybe, for us, sometimes there's a merger, right? Two banks come together and they're creating a new brand, or they're expanding and they want to know whether their brand is going to, make a connection in those new regions. So learning is essential. Sometimes it's as simple as doing a survey monkey to just find out, what's going on with your internal employees, because the foot soldiers usually have the best idea of what's going on. Leadership, though they have a great vision for the future, it's the worker bees that are really getting the frontline information. So getting into their minds and understanding, picking their brain a little bit, understand what they're seeing on a day-to-day basis, whether it's through the call center or through the branches or online. They have a good understanding. So it starts with that pooling of all the information.
Sure, I was going to say that too, like gathering data, because your opinion might not be the same as your audience or your internal folks. And at the end of the day, if your branding is not as effective as it possibly could be, like let's dive in and take a look at how we can improve it. And a new look and feel might be, and messaging might be it. So.
Yeah, no, Paul, you made a really good point saying, the worker bees, people who are in the branches every day, who see it, who interact with customers, have a different perspective than the C-suite folks and the executives who are really the decision makers there. So, you really want to avoid that myopic view of, nope, everything's going good. I see it from, the main branch, but, all your other branches or all your other, it could be totally different. Customer complaints, recognition, a new competitor comes in, a similar feel. It's like, okay, maybe it is time to change it up, even though people up top might not see that.
So, because it's an investment, it's an investment. I mean, let's face it. Money has to be spent. Hours need to be, used, and there needs to be a goal, right? And if leadership is seeing like no problem at all, then they need to be convinced that, hey, there's something going on you may not know. So when we're doing our discovery process, we usually do it in 3 groups. So you have sort of frontline staff that has a type of information, that will pull out, and then mid-level managers, because they have a perspective that's very unique, and then absolutely leadership. And then when you look at all three, you can see, which overlap, what areas need work, where the message can be enhanced. And, that's the beginning of the process, is gathering, as Alina said, all that data from the three different levels of the organization. And then you start there.
Do you see any discrepancies from group 1 versus group 2 versus group 3 at all? Has there been some big, overlap, like, oh, one group is over here while the other group's over here, what they feel is the brand?
Well, I think it's definitely differs from organization to organization. There are some that are very, they're very flat, right? So there's a lot of internal communication, and they're passing it along in the hallways, and there's, and that goes a long way. But you do see, just based off of what your job is every day, that you're going to see more. But I will just emphasize all three, or even going from the front staff to leadership, very, very important, so that they can learn from each other, because the vision is important too, because it's a goal setting thing. Are we there yet? That's what we want to be, even if you might be off a little bit, it's still, sort of your North Star that you're pointing towards something. And then you can, talk to your, the other levels of the organization to find out whether you're actually succeeding or not succeeding.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a team effort. As we know, we can have all hands on the same goal, because if you don't, that's where we see discrepancies. Communication breaks off. The brand isn't really full and true to what it should be. So yeah, definitely having all hands on deck should be priority 1 for your financial institution. But this brings me back to another point. So what comes first? Is it the logo comes first, or does the brand have to be established first?
Definitely. Well, I think that, in talking about the discovery sessions like we were and things like that, I think you have to really make sure that you develop your brand strategy overall, and develop that foundation that's everything else is going to be built on before you can, have the visuals represent it in the marketplace. So,
no, that's it. I mean, you're trying to uncover proof points. Right? You're saying you're this. Okay, well, let's prove it. Let's go through the organization. Where does it, actually come to life? And then once you have all the, we'll use word data again, but once we have all that information, then you can look at the logo and say, is it fulfilling on that promise? Is it actually the visual representation that helps people, going back to being a reminder, is it a good reminder of who we are? If it's falling short, then maybe we need to refresh. If it's falling really, really short, then maybe it has to be, an overhaul.
Yeah.
Now, Paul, what would you say determines that course of action overall for, a new brand?
I mentioned a few, like if two organizations come together, there's a need to, merge two organizations. So what does it mean when, two different parts of town, of a city come together to become one brand? There's a lot of dissension sometimes. Well, some employees don't want that change, right? So building a brand has some hurdles, right? You have to bring the people together, understand, what the similarities are first, so that you can kind of build off of that. But the beginning usually is some sort of change, is either necessary or is in place. If you're old, like I think we've talked a little bit, if you're 150 years old and you really haven't changed much, and the audience is changing, someone in the organization has to, put up a, sort of a flag and says, hey, we need to do something. That's usually a marketing director searching for an agency. They'll find Panos, fortunately, and then we'll put together, a plan.
Yeah. So, say I am that financial institution. I've been around for 150 plus years. I got desperate need for an agency, a logo, a brand, a discovery. Alina, where do you think it really does start? It seems overwhelming. It seems like a lot, but how do I even just get in the door to start this process?
Come talk to us.
Go ahead. Prayer. Maybe.
Seriously, you want to have a team on your side, and I think that going through the process is important, as much as it could be painful and complicated. But in order to come out with a consistent consistency, which is like huge when it comes to branding. You know, you want everything to be in line with your values and what you want, where your goals are going. So in order to have that through visuals, through messaging, through all the things, you know, you kind of have to take baby steps, but you have to start at the beginning. Like you have to really look
You have to just start, right?
Yeah. You have to look at your internal, you know, all your core stuff before you can, and then you'll have that piece for a designer like myself, which makes it so much easier than starting with a blank canvas, right? So I mean, we, at the end of the day, if you have that much longevity and, you know, and market recognition and things like that, and you don't want to throw things away, okay, that's great, and we don't, you know, need to do that at all. But what are some things, you know, you need to pull out those nuggets of things that we can work with to infuse in there, you know, and what's important to keep and what's, you know, not as important to keep, and, you know, having those specific things to go into it is really helpful.
The one thing we haven't talked about, which I think is, whether it's the beginning, the middle, or the end, or whatever, but it's certainly an important factor, is it energizes a brand. And I think oftentimes, you know, the beginning of a brand development process is like, how do we make a shift? You know, we need to do something different. Like I said, you know, is it a new area we need to go into, or do we have new employees, or are we looking for new employees? There's some need for a little bit of an energy shift. And when you do a discovery, it's bringing in all the people. It's like, I want to listen to you. What do you have to say? And then I'm going to use that to influence our brand. So it tells people that at all levels in an organization that you care about me. You know, you care about what I have to say. So when that brand does come to life, they go, you know what, there's some sense of pride. Hey, I was a part of that. They called me in, you know, I was part of the survey process. And then you may even see a little bit of what, you know, you gave an answer to a survey question, you go, oh my God, I answered that. I could see myself in that next level of brand development, and that's invigorates a brand. Definitely. Internally.
Yeah, no, that brings a sense of, you know, community, you know, it really allows people to feel heard and a part of the brand, and that's great. So this has been absolutely phenomenal. I know we covered so much about brand, logo, tagline, starting a brand, knowing when it's time for a refresh and everything. So if you're a financial institution out there looking to refresh your brand, logo, or tagline, you have your people in Paul and Alina. So that's all I have. I think we covered a lot today. It was an absolute pleasure, Paul and Alina. And thank you to all of our listeners here and viewers. And I think that's all we got. So if there's any other questions, feel free to reach out. Paul, I think he's just ptonelli@panosmarketing.com. And Alina McGinty at panosmarketing.com. And then myself, Jay Julio at panosmarketing.com. So I'll let everyone go. Thank you guys again. Have a great one.